Hey, listeners. Welcome back to yet another episode of Beyond the Unknown. I'm your host, Jolie,
And I'm Quinn.
and today we're going to tell you about the lost souls that have haunted the shores of one Canadian city for over 100 years and the tragedy that started it all. On the morning of December 6th, 1917, people started their day just like any other in the busy port city of Halifax, Nova Scotia. For those unfamiliar, this is a small city in the Atlantic region of Canada and really close to where Quinn and I grew up since it's a neighboring province next to New Brunswick, another maritime province of the East. This growing city at the time housed close to 65,000 people in 1917. So it's a pretty large city given the time. And like many port cities and towns that develop near where the goods can be transported in and out of, it had many homes, schools, and factories, and a major train route lining the shores. But this story doesn't start on land. Instead, we're heading into the chilly Atlantic Ocean waters to follow a steamship called the Mont Blanc. And, oh, I'm going to start that over.
I get you. I feel bad for all the edits you're gonna have to do in the last one.
It's fine. This story doesn't start on land. Instead, we're heading into the chilly Atlantic Ocean waters to follow a steamship called the Mont Blanc that was headed inbound toward Halifax from New York. Since this was during World War One, the Mont Blanc wasn't traveling just for pleasure. It was on a job transporting war materials all the way from France. You might be thinking, what kind of war materials? Well, maybe clothing, food, guns. Well, the Mont
Yeah,
Blanc,
that's what you'd expect.
yeah. Well, the Mont Blanc was carrying highly hazardous explosive materials used for bombs, guns, and other artillery. Aboard the
Okay.
ship,
So it's kind of like those dangerous like trains nowadays,
yeah,
like with all the oil and stuff.
yeah, but maybe worse. Actually, definitely
Yeah,
worse.
far worse. Yeah, because the bombs and the artillery.
Yeah. Aboard the ship, campaign. Sorry, I'm just gonna wait for little Ziggy to get comfortable, I guess. Don't mind your mom's hopes and dreams, Ziggy. Walk right in.
She's just got shit to do.
Sounds like she's wearing high heels. I need to cut her nails.
High heels.
All right. Aboard the ship contained 2,300 tons of picric, I don't, I don't know how to say that, acid, 200
Oh,
tons of TNT, 35 tons of high octane gasoline, and 10 tons of gun cotton. And gun
that's a
cotton
shit
isn't just
ton
like a
of
ton of
like,
cotton.
oh, what is it?
It's like another kind of thing that catches fire easily that's used for
Oh,
guns. I thought when I first read it, it was like stuff that would clean guns, like a little
yeah.
cotton thing, but it's not. It's like instead of gunpowder, you can use gun cotton.
It makes sense that it's not cleaning tools because 10 tons of gun cleaning tools would be outrageous. But also, this is basically just like a floating fire hazard.
Yeah, exactly. Now, typically, ships carrying hazardous cargo, even in modern day, are required to sail with a B flag. So it's a solid red flag with like a V cut into the side. So from afar, it would kind of look like a B. And this flag specifically indicates to other ships that it's taking in or discharging or carrying dangerous goods. However, attacks from German U-boats were rampant during this time because these U-boats were really good at sinking enemy ships when they were least expecting them. And for clarity, these U-boats were submarines. Oops, sorry. And for clarity, these U-boats are submarines, so other ships had really no idea when it was coming. And because I'm on a roll, I'm going to tell you why they're called U-boats.
I was actually wondering, so I'm glad.
U-boats, it's a shorter term because it's easier to say than the German equivalent. I'm going to say the name of this boat in German, and I want you to guess what it could possibly translate to. Unter
Okay.
Unterseeboot.
Honestly, it seems like under the sea boat.
Exactly. It's exactly that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
When I read this,
Untersea boat.
I laughed because obviously German words are notorious for being like extremely to the point, and it just made
Yeah.
me chuckle. And then I realized, why do we call ours submarines? What's submarine? What's under the water? We don't specify, but they say it's
You're
an under
just
the sea boat.
yeah, that's I like that a lot better. Submarine just means like something is submarine, but like
Yeah.
what? I agree with you. Like that's wild.
Okay, I took us off course. So we're gonna go back to
That's
the
fine.
Mont Blanc that's flying without its B flag. So no one really knew, other than the crew, that what was aboard this French ship.
Okay.
It headed through the Halifax Narrows, which is a tight passageway leading from the Atlantic Ocean to the Bedford Basin, which is the largest part of a shelter. No, it's the largest part of the sheltered Halifax Harbor. But as it was approaching, it was met with. I'm going to start over. But the Mont Blanc was met by an approaching Norwegian ship called Emo, which was leaving the Bedford Basin, heading in the opposite direction towards the Narrows, so it could make its journey to New York to load supplies for occupied Belgium. Emo was supposed to stop and let the inbound Mont Blanc safely make its way through the passage before carrying on. But it kept moving.
Just so the reader or listeners can understand, it's emo, IMO, not like emo. I'm emotional and I
Oh,
have
yeah.
like side swoop black bangs over my face.
I would like to imagine a ship that's with bangs.
An emo ship, yeah.
Yeah.
It's got side swoop sails. Black side swoop sails.
But it kept moving, and a little too fast at that. The crews aboard the Mont Blanc, as well as pilots flying above, who were regularly used to guide ships and monitor the passageways, were signaling to Emo to stop immediately. Instead, the ship moved forward towards the center of the Narrows, and for a moment, the crew thought maybe they had a chance to squeeze by. That is until Emo made a hasty decision to reverse the ship, which you'd think would be a good thing, but traveling at that speed, it actually made the ship rotate, colliding with the Mont Blanc and immediately causing the ship's cargo to ignite.
Oh my God.
The crew
A
understood.
floating tinderbox is on fire now.
Yeah, well, more than a tinderbox, and you're gonna
Yeah.
wait. The crew understood the gravity of the situation, and by crew, I mean crew of the Mont Blanc only. They understood the gravity
Okay.
of the situation, so they immediately evacuated the ship into their lifeboats, paddling toward the Dartmouth shores. But most everyone else, like the crew of Emo, the other dock ships in the harbor, or even bystanders on the shore watching the inflamed ship, had really no idea of the dangers it posed and the destruction it was about to cause. While the Mont Blanc's crew paddled to safety, the fiery ship started to drift closer and closer to the Halifax piers until it couldn't move any closer. And at 9:04 a.m., just 20 minutes after the fire began, the ship exploded, turning a cargo ship into a 3 kiloton bomb in a bustling port. This
That's
explosion,
insanity.
mhm, this explosion was the equivalent of a 3,000 ton dynamite. Oh, sorry. This explosion was the equivalent of 3,000 tons of dynamite and was the largest man made explosion before the atomic bombs were dropped in 1945.
That's wild. I
Uh
actually
huh.
didn't know that. Like, we obviously all know the heritage moment of this story if you live in Canada, but I had no idea that the explosion was that intense.
Yeah, they don't teach you this in school. They're like, big bomb.
No.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
crazy.
fire.
Yep. Way worse than that. Luckily, all but one of the members of the Mont Blanc crew were able to survive the explosion because they got to the Dartmouth shores in time. However, those on the Halifax side, so just across the harbor, weren't as fortunate. This explosion threw the hull of the ship 1,000 feet into the air. Yeah. Where chunks of debris from the ship, along with fuel and other chemicals it was carrying, rained down on everyone within an 8-kilometer range of the wreckage, leaving everyone covered in an oily film.
That's a massive range. 8 kilometers. If
Uh-huh.
you're American, what 1 kilometer is 100 meters, or is it 1,000? Oh my God, I don't even know.
1 kilometer
It's
is
a
a thousand
thousand.
meters.
Yeah. Okay, so even bigger than I was picturing in my head.
Yeah.
Oh,
um, anything within a
anything within.
yeah. Anything within a 2.5-kilometer radius of the shore was decimated. So other ships, homes, factories, and the end of the railway. Every window in the city was apparently shattered, and even windows shattered in Truro, another city in Nova Scotia that's 100 kilometers away.
That's wild. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is so far from the harbor.
Yeah. And homes further out faced extreme destruction, like missing roofs, doors, and even complete walls if they didn't already fall down. The blast claimed the lives of 2,000 unsuspecting people, wounding over 9,000 and displacing many in the midst of the severe East Coast winter. And if you don't know,
I
winter on
don't
the
think I
East Coast,
realized that.
oh, they'll go.
You go.
Okay. If you don't know, winter on the east coast of Canada is not friendly for those needing to stay in severely damaged homes because it's very damp, it's extremely cold and icy, and it's not a great condition to be in.
So it's like a perpetual debate here in Alberta because it's a dry cold and East Coast is a damp cold. And so we always say, like, what's colder, a -8 dry or a -8 damp? And I firmly, firmly believe that the damp actually is worse. There's been
Yeah.
studies, and apparently it's not actually any colder, but it's bone chillingly cold. And they have a lot of ice in the East Coast. But I actually had no idea that this happened in the winter. Didn't
Me
know that.
neither. Again, thank you, Heritage Minutes or Moments, for not
Yeah.
educating me enough.
We should do the heritage moments because clearly
Yeah.
a lot was left out.
Exactly. Uh, Government of Canada, we are available.
Yeah, just get a hold of us. We have our social available at the end of this episode.
This is such a tragic incident in history that shook nations. With that being said, there are some unsung heroes and maybe good things that rose from the ashes. The first person I want to highlight is Dr. Clement Courtney Lejour, a physician that treated hundreds of victims from the explosion. Dr. Lejour was born in Trinidad and moved to the US and then subsequently Canada, where he studied medicine at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. He graduated from medicine in 1916, 1 year before Queen's started banning Black students from their medical programs. We don't
Oh
talk about
my
that moment in
God.
history.
I did not know that they went like backwards and
Mm-hmm.
weren't banning, but then were banning on the basis of color of skin. That's wild.
Yep.
Super glad I didn't ever go to that school.
Yeah, same.
Well,
Not
I,
because I
I
didn't.
got into that one. And so I'm glad I
Mhm.
didn't go. That's a terrible history.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't either. After
Blech.
graduation, Dr. Lejour moved to Halifax with hopes of working as a doctor. Sadly, he was denied access to work in the city's medical facilities because of his race. So then he tried to enlist in the war
What?
efforts. Yeah, no one talks about this, but like Canada also extremely racist at this time, and we only talk about historical moments like the war, the explosion. But can we talk about what was happening to minorities at this time?
I had no idea. We talk all the time about how the Americans are awful and only they played a part in like being racist crooks, but obviously Canada was
Mm-mm.
just as culpable by the sounds of it.
I mean, definitely in some practices.
Oy, oy, oy. Okay. Well, the
Yeah.
more you know.
So then he tried to enlist in the war efforts, but again, he was denied. Frustrated with constant denial due to his race, he decided to open up his own private clinic out of his home. There, he treated hundreds of patients a day after the explosion. How many patients a day do you think he saw during the following weeks of the explosion, on average?
I literally can't even imagine, first of all, seeing hundreds of patients per day. Like I could barely see eight.
What's normal for like a, I don't
Gosh.
know, family doctor or something?
Oof, I want to say like 30, 50, maybe. Like even
Okay.
that's really high, I think. I don't actually know,
Hmm.
but hundreds, like that's wild. So if he was going at that kind of a rate, and I'm guessing he wasn't following like work labor laws and was just working around the clock,
What work
I'm
labor
gonna
laws?
guess like yeah, that's a good point actually. They have some for residents in place now, like was it 36 hours? But yeah, so I don't know. Like I want to guess like thousands. I don't know, 5,000.
No, I said this is per day.
Oh, how many patients a day?
I said
Oh
like, I
God.
give you a range of like, I say hundreds, but just wanted to know what you thought was
Um,
reasonable for a person to do.
Literally 100. You couldn't do more. I don't know how you do more.
Well, he did do more. He did roughly 180 patients a day, working literally day and night to treat those in
You'd
need.
have to. How would you? I don't even know how you do that. Like you'd
Yeah, I
have to
don't know.
see like groups of people, grouped, like group assessments. I don't know how
Yeah.
you would do
And
that.
throw what? Throw
Wow.
gauze at them and then like turn around and see another group of 10
Honestly.
people.
But even so, like that's like really like challenging. Like talk about burnout and just being like such an upstanding citizen. Meanwhile, he's getting shut down left, right, and center because of his race. But look what he did for the people. Like I just, oh, it sickens me to think
Hmm.
that, you know, I can't even imagine.
Our great history.
Hmm.
Once the mayhem of the explosion settled down, he wasn't done being an outstanding citizen. He started recruiting for the number 2 construction battalion. Sorry, number 2 construction battalion, Canada's only last. Sorry, what did I write here? That's not right. He's,
Oh,
yeah. He started recruiting for the number 2 construction battalion, Canada's only all black battalion, and then took over editing at the Atlantic Advocate, one of Canada's first magazines produced by and for people of color.
what an outrageously outstanding citizen and like a martyr for all that is good.
I know. And he did all of this when he was like 30 years old, like 30, 31. And unfortunately, at the age of 34, when he went back to Trinidad to go visit his family, he contracted malaria and died.
Oh, think of all the things he could have continued to do.
I
I can't
know.
even imagine.
Another young notable, no, another
Yodable.
word young, not
Yodeling.
even there. This guy,
Yeah,
not even young, I'm about to talk
can't
about.
handle it. He's young. He's young.
It's his spirit talking through me right now.
Hmm.
Another notable figure during this time was Vince Coleman. So I'm going to give you a little chance. Who do you think Vince Coleman is?
Like, what was his role?
Yeah, who is he? You would have known him when we grew up.
What?
I mean, you wouldn't have personally known him, but you would have heard about him. You
Oh
kind of referred to
gosh.
it earlier.
Like, oh shoot, what did I say earlier? I don't know, someone in like is high up in the army, like some kind of something to do with the army. I have
All
no
right.
idea.
Well, if you were a child growing up in Canada, literally what you said earlier, you might have seen a Heritage Minute on this guy. It's, I think, the only Heritage Minute on the Halifax Explosion.
Honestly,
Heritage,
like literally remember nothing educational ever at any point whatsoever. So I probably have seen it, but I don't recognize the name.
oh, this one has stuck with me to this day. Heritage
Okay.
Minutes, for those who weren't Canadian or maybe didn't watch TV growing up, it's like a 1 minute reenactment clip that played during commercial breaks, and they were supposed to be sponsored or paid for by the Canadian government to teach people about our history. So they're kind of reenactments of things of that time, of whatever they're trying to educate you about. Vince Coleman is considered a hero because he ensured the safety of over 700 train passengers that day by sending one telegraph, and telegraphs are kind of like using those Morse code lines and dots. And
Hmm.
he sent it to an inbound train from St. John, New Brunswick, telling it to stop immediately. You see, many people didn't know the gravity of the situation, but Vince and a select few near the shore did because a sailor ran ashore to warn the folks that they needed to leave quickly. The
Wow.
sailor warned people 2 minutes before the explosion occurred. So, not many could really get to safety, but they did have a fighting chance to maybe hide behind some buildings or something.
Oh,
But
I
in,
remember this heritage
yeah,
moment.
yep. Beep, 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 beep. That's like half of the
Yep.
Heritage Minute. Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of saving himself, Vince stayed back at the train dispatching station to send a telegraph to the approaching train. In the Heritage Minute, as a kid, you see him sending a telegraph and he's sitting with this metal thing, hitting it repeatedly. And I always assumed that he was sending this code to say, like, stop, stop, stop. Because they don't
Yeah,
tell
me
you what
too.
he's writing. It's just like
No, it's
constant,
just
like
beep,
beep, beep,
beep.
beep, 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 beep. And it sounds the
Yeah.
same. So you're like, must be the same thing over and over and over
Like,
again.
stop.
Yeah. But it wasn't. He actually sent one single telegraph and really took his time writing it out. And he said the following: hold up the train, ammunition hold up the train, ammunition ship afire in harbor, making for Pier 6 and will explode. Guess this will be my last message. Goodbye, boys. Isn't that
Oh my
sad?
God. That's devastating, first
Yeah.
of all. Second of all, I don't know why they would have left that out of the Heritage Minute. That's
I know.
fascinating that he like was able to get out that full message that he did. And then that's probably why they left it out. It's absolutely devastating. That self-awareness that he
Mm-hmm.
clearly knew he was going to die. He clearly knew of the sacrifice he made. And I think they probably thought that was just too hard for people to see. That's sad.
Yeah. And maybe it's a
Man.
lot for 30 seconds, but it's just
But that's
really
like
surprising.
I think that makes it even like, not that it wasn't heroic in the first place, but that makes it even more so. Like he knew he was
Yeah, he knew he was
dying.
sacrificing himself. And they don't say that in the Heritage Minute. They're like
Not
beep
at
beep beep
all. They
beep.
just,
And then thank you, Vince, for your time. You died in this tragedy.
no,
No.
they do show him like looking up as in like startled, like as if something
True.
like that last second, but there's no indication in that. Oh, sorry, you're going to hear a beep there. There's no indication that in that moment that it wasn't shock,
Mm-hmm.
like that it was like, okay, here it is. It's just, it's portrayed so differently.
Yeah. Another positive that came from the explosion. Actually, sorry, that's not a positive. One one positive that came from the explosion is the creation of CNIB, or the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. Because so many window panes shattered in an instant, this resulted in 691 eye injuries for those living, including permanently embedded glass, and 41 people completely blind in both eyes. During the 2 weeks that followed the explosion, there were 250 eyeballs removed and 206 survivors who lost sight in a single eye, needing to be monitored over a short time to ensure that the sight in their second eye, their like functional eye,
Mhm.
didn't go on them, probably because it
Wow.
still had some damage. The CNIB volunteers help survivors learn to navigate their new reality by empowering them with new skills like reading Braille. And now, this organization, obviously much larger, it's Canada wide, and it still is really focused on making sure that people who are blind are living their best lives and are living like a very healthy life. So they're always doing like eye exams for the community, teaching people who are recently blind to read Braille, to walk with these special sticks. And then they have volunteer programs where if you'd like to help someone with sight issues, then you can like volunteer and do like their grocery shopping for them or like taking them to appointments. And there's a
That's incredible.
yeah, and there's a restaurant in Vancouver that you and I have been to that is very supported by CNIB, and they employ only blind servers that we went to because it's all dark. It's the dine in the dark room.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that was a really cool initiative, I think. I thought that was a really cool experience. I think that the amount of people who had their eyes removed or that were affected, it goes to show how many people were watching this unfold out their windows, having no
Yep.
idea what was to come. And their last vision or like memory of seeing would have been that. I think
Yeah.
that's very challenging.
Hmm. Okay. So I did say at the start there were restless spirits, but I never talked about
Oh, I
ghosts yet.
bet.
So now it's time to
I
get
can
spooky.
I can only imagine the amount of deaths in such a tragic way there has to be.
Yep. With so many deaths come many restless spirits. One place in Halifax is notorious for hauntings, even to this very day. The Five Fishermen restaurant, where our sister Tash had her graduation dinner, was apparently used as a morgue during those times called Snow's Mortuary. Isn't that crazy?
I didn't know that because I've eaten there and I've been told the ghost stories, like it's by the bathroom or something like that. But anyways,
There's
I don't want to.
tons.
Okay, I
So,
knew it was haunted. I just
yeah,
wow.
I picked a few from the Five Fishermen's restaurant, but actually, that restaurant has their own website and they have a page dedicated to the ghost stories experienced by
I
their
didn't
staff.
wild. I didn't know that. And also for anyone listening, it is actually such a good
It's
restaurant.
so good.
Highly recommend.
They
Yeah.
have like a muscle bar. You just get up and get
Oh,
as many muscles as you want. Remember that? Ugh, felt like
yes.
a
Oh
queen.
man. Let's go there in the summer.
Yeah. So this mortuary housed many bodies from the explosion awaiting their final resting place. But it has more history than that. And 5 years before the explosion, it also housed the unrest. It also housed the resting souls and the bodies that washed up ashore from the Titanic.
I was gonna ask you about that because obviously the Titanic happened in the same like Atlantic waters closer to the Canadian
Hmm.
side, and I didn't know time-wise which happened first. So Titanic, then the Halifax
Titanic
explosion.
happened 5 years before this in 1912.
Wow.
And then, for those who don't know, um, a lot of bodies washed up in Halifax and the surrounding areas. So there is a Titanic like graveyard dedicated to this where they buried the bodies.
A lot of the
Um,
rescue boats came out of the Halifax port.
mhm,
Like Halifax was heavily involved in everything that happened
yeah.
with the Titanic.
And then just 5 years later, another extremely tragic incident happened. So these people must, like these survivors, have seen it all. Um, and so
Yep.
when I say there's like ghosts that have resulted from this explosion, it's likely that they could also be from the Titanic.
Yeah, fair.
Okay. So to the Five Fishermen restaurant, many employees have experienced ghostly encounters. It's almost like a rite of passage if you're going to work there. And they've experienced things like glasses being thrown, cutlery sliding off the tables, taps turning on by themselves, and even passing through ice cold pockets of air. But that's the norm. That is nothing out of the ordinary when you work there. But staff have had
Wild.
more haunting experiences that um, they've written about on their website. So they have tons of stories, but I just selected a few. Definitely recommend checking out the Five Fishermen website if you want to learn more.
Oh
But
my
one of the
gosh, we have
stories,
to, before
yeah,
we go, read the
oh yeah,
stories and then try to have our own experience.
and go to the exact locations.
Yes.
One of the stories was when a staff member was using their credit card machine. So, kind of modern day, well, pretty modern day. And they
Yeah.
felt someone tap their shoulder. But because this was like, well, because they were trying to get something done quickly on the machine, I think they just like, waited a couple more seconds before turning around. But this person was impatient and they tapped their shoulder again. So the person quickly turned around and no one was there.
I feel like one tap, you're like, okay, did I imagine that? But
Yeah.
tapped you again, like that's an insistent, like, hey, look at me. That's terrifying.
Yeah.
Ah.
Another instance was when a new employee was on his first shift and it was middle of the day around like 3 p.m. And all of a sudden he heard a loud crashing noise. He waited a few moments and then decided to check on the noise and he found an old ashtray on the ground. While he was picking it up, he could see the reflection of an old man in a mirror who was slowly walking away from the area and was walking, I think, towards like an exit or in like a hallway. And when he got up, he didn't see this old man anywhere. Oh, I'm going to say that over because I missed a sentence. He remembers that this old man was wearing clothes from what seemed like a different time period. When he got up, the old man was nowhere to be found. And the kid kind of shrugged it off and went back to his task, assuming nothing of it until he kind of told staff later, and they were like, "Oh yeah, that's a ghost."
Oh my god. As much as I find all of this fascinating, I'd be so scared to work there because like it's
Yeah, knowing
cool, but
this.
it still freaks me out. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I would not want to be staff there, especially because it's not like it only happens at night when no one's around. It seems to be happening like midday, really anytime. So that kind of cuts it for the five fishermen, but there are tons of other stories.
Oh, the
But I have
story
heard,
I was told
oh,
when I
yeah.
went there, like when you go, the staff will say to the women specifically to get to the ladies' bathroom, you have to walk up these narrow, tiny little staircases and then hang a right into this tiny little parlor that serves as the women's bathroom. Do you remember that?
No, I don't.
And apparently there's like like a female ghost again wearing clothes of that time that people like patrons or the staff will sometimes see. I never saw her, but you know when someone tells you something freaky, so you're kind of on the lookout. So I felt
Yeah.
on edge like the whole time using the bathroom, like the couple of times I've been there, but I've never had an experience, unfortunately.
Feel like you'd only experience it when you're least like expecting it.
Yeah.
You're
Because I
like,
was like
that's weird.
looking
What's
for
going
it.
on?
Yeah.
Yeah. Another popular story from Halifax is the one of St. Paul's Church. You and I have driven by this.
Yes.
Rumor has it that on the morning of the explosion, a deacon was standing in front of the window. And due to the intense light and heat from the explosion, his profile was forever etched on the glass, leaving his shadow behind for years to come. Others say that the deacon was standing near the window when the explosion occurred and his head was cut clean off from the glass, and that his silhouette haunts this window to this day. Whatever the cause of the silhouette, it remains a popular oddity in the historic church. Despite attempts to clean the glass over the years, the face in the window remains.
I've definitely seen the face.
We've seen
You
it, we've
definitely
driven
have.
by. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And like we went and looked at it even again, like for like school stuff, like
Hmm.
running around like the city. It's there. There's some times of day though where it looks, I think, more obvious than others.
Hmm.
And so like there's even people who say that, the ghost is there and he's actually still standing there watching. And I
Hmm.
kind of believe that because there's times where I have driven by and I don't see the face.
Okay.
I'm being honest. Like that's just me, but maybe it was the way the light was reflecting or shadows from because there's a lot of trees around there too.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know.
Spooky nonetheless.
Hmm.
All right. Well, that's the tale of the Halifax explosion, a horrific and preventable tragedy that devastated the east coast of Canada, leaving many spirits lingering in our realm. So, do you think these stories are true?
100%. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Beyond the Unknown. If you have a story you'd like to share, please email us at moody.mediaprod@gmail.com. You can reach out on our website, and who knows, your story might be featured in our next episode.
All of our sources for this episode can be found on our website, beyondtheunknownpod.com. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review.
Until next time, listeners, stay curious and remember that the unknown is always just beyond the shadows.
Oh,
Bye.